Good morning, fellow Plexers and members of the Plex Media Server Support Group. Today's video is going to be about Synology NASs because we've had two group members ask about them today. So Andrew wanted to know about using a Synology NAS, and a little bit earlier Scott asked the difference between these two NASs, a Qnap and this Synology DS923 Plus. So let's talk about Plex hardware transcoding a little bit, and we'll talk about Plex's excellent NAS compatibility guide. I'll show you how my DS1520 Plus handles 4K media with a direct play and a transcode. And then we'll talk about the specs of each of these units and why neither one is suitable for a Plex server unless it's local play only and all your media is 100% compatible with every client device you have locally. And then we'll look at some prices for a Synology to buy used if you can't buy one new. And we'll talk about an option for an Intel NUC or a micro form factor Dell PC to serve as a Plex server using more of a dumb NAS or a NAS that can't hardware transcode. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, but hopefully it'll all make sense. So to start out with, Plex has this excellent guide for using hardware accelerated streaming. It talks about doing it on the iGPU of certain Intel CPUs or through a compatible NVIDIA card in your system or even in your NAS. Some Qnap NASs can take a video card. I am a huge Synology fan. I love their interface, but I wish they had better CPUs. I would love a Synology NAS with an i5 13 Gen CPU mobile processor with the Iris Xe graphics in it. That would be a dream machine, especially if it came with 10 or 12 bays for a hard drive, for hard drives, but that'll never happen. So then we can move into Plex's excellent NAS compatibility list. And if you click this link here, you will download a fresh version of a spreadsheet they keep. So let's see what the model Qnap is, TS433. We're not going to find it here. It must be a new model. So we go from 432s to 435s. So if we jump over to the spec sheet for it, we'll see that it only has an ARM processor. There's no iGPU built in. This is really only going to be capable of being a file server. But Plex will run on a potato. So if this is able to install Plex on it, which I don't know, you can serve up local content all day long. But the minute you have a transcode, the software side of the CPU itself has no real power. So a software transcode is going to fail, as it would on more powerful processors if you're up to the 4K media size. So this is definitely out. This is not a choice unless you were going to run Plex somewhere else and just host your media on it. So if we go back to the compatibility guide and go down to Synology, we'll see that the 923 uses a 64-bit AMD processor, but the problem is there's no iGPU built in, so we don't have any hardware accelerated transcoding. And no matter how powerful a CPU is, it just doesn't have enough to do many software transcoded streams. If we slide down to the 920 series, well, let's not go that far. Let's go to the 922. Synology released a 1522 with an AMD processor in 2022, and again, there's no hardware accelerated transcoding because it lacks an iGPU. If we drop down to the 2021 series, you'll see they even have some Xeon based NASs. But because those Intel Xeon CPUs do not have an iGPU, you're really wasting your money on that better hardware for Plex. For a database, these things are excellent, but not for Plex. So the last year that Plex made a lot of Plex-capable units, or Synology made a lot of Plex-capable units, was 2020. You'll see how the DS1520, 920, 720, and 420 all have the Celeron J425 CPU in it, and we think of a Celeron CPU as not being powerful, but it has an iGPU in it which can hardware transcode 4K media and all media below it with some limitations. So an H.264 2060p stream, it's only going to be able to handle it with SDR. With HEVC SDR media, it's not going to direct stream that locally or remotely. It's going to direct play it, which is not a transcode, it's a container change. And you're not going to really notice any difference besides now knowing what the difference is between direct stream and direct play. And you'll see the Slim, because it has an older processor in it, an older Celeron, cannot do the HEVC HDR content. So again, this is transcoding only. It'll direct play or direct stream all the media that doesn't need to be transcoded, and it's only going to direct play the 4K content, and that's what the H.264 output means. So H.264 4K media, doesn't matter what it is, it's going to direct play or direct stream it. When you get to the HEVC or H.265, they mean the same thing. That's where there's a container change. So let's do this. I have my Plex server pulled up, and I actually have 3 servers. This is my old DS1019 Plus NAS that I started on. It's still up. It's eventually going to be a backup server offsite for my main Plex media on the DS1520. And a few months ago, I experimented with Unraid on a little Intel 11th Gen i5 NUC. So we're watching the DS1523 here. And I'm going to start a 4K video off screen. And just pause it. So what we're looking at is where it says direct play here. And let me zoom in. So you'll never see it say direct stream with HEVC 4K media. But it doesn't matter, it's just a container change. It's not a transcode. Alright, so let me get back to my movie. And let's change this. I'm going to force it into a 720p 4 megabit per second stream.
Your hands sweat before a fight.
And I'm going to pause the video. My apologies, that was a long pause. I discovered that the Linux Plex HTPC client app on my computer has a bug in it. It was recently updated, and I can no longer force a transcode. When I try, it sticks with its original video. So I've switched to an old TV in my office with a NVIDIA Shield tube style device on it, and I have the same video playing now with it muted. So I'm going to go in, and now I'm going to force a 1080p transcode at 8 megabits per second. So we're just waiting for a dashboard to catch up with that change. Alright, there it is. There's the change. So You'll see this 4K HEVC video is now hardware transcoding, and it's also switching containers to the H.264, and the audio is transcoding also. And I have a subtitle loaded to boot because lots of people have trouble with subtitles, and I wanted to show that that works. So now we're going to do one more adjustment before we set it back to normal. And now we're going to take it down to Plex's old default of 720p 2 megabits per second. So right now the video's buffering. It just started up on my TV. And we'll see how long it takes to update dashboard. Alright, so I didn't even catch the change. So it's now transcoding to SD, and everything just works off this Synology server. So let me put this back to normal. Alright, and that was a quick change. Well, we still have, it says transcoding. Let me just check my system here. Okay, it changed to direct play by itself. It took a second. So that is the beauty of the iGPU in these little units. And all modern Intel processors have an iGPU, and you really want a 8th gen or newer. Doesn't matter if it's a desktop or a mobile processor. Let me take you to a new setting with Plex. Let's go back to my server settings. Now I'm in the same NAS here. Walker 63 is my DS1520. And if I go down to transcoder and slide down, the hardware transcoding device is set to auto, but if I hit the down box, it'll show you that the iGPU is a UHD Graphics 600. If I change to my older NAS, the DS1019, that's the HD Graphics 500. Now that wasn't bad. A DS918 and 1019 both have the same CPU, as does the one we mentioned from 2020, the Slim. The 620 Slim has that same CPU. It's not a bad CPU, but the 920 series or the 2020 Plus series were better. And now if I switch to my little 11th gen Intel NUC running Unraid, you'll see that's the Iris Xe graphics, which is the same transcoding power as the regular iGPU in the desktop processors. Okay, so we know this is no good for Plex. And then let's go to the new DS423, which is not on the NAS Compatibility List. I've been waiting for 3 or 4 months for Plex to add this, but so far it's not here. Well, if you check its specs, it has this same Celeron J4125 CPU. Right here. Now the only thing is it comes with a low amount of memory that's only upgradable to 6. So you've got to add a 4 gigabit stick of memory to it right off the bat. And 6 will be enough. The DS920 shipped with 4, upgradable to 8, and the DS1520 Plus shipped with 8. Now these are all upgradable to more memory, and you can watch different YouTube videos and people will talk about whether it's worth doing it, whether the system actually recognizes it. But to be safe for full compatibility, just pop in the maximum amount that this baby can hold. That'll be enough for Plex. Now another option is to look for a DS920 or even a 1520 used. And you got to be careful. You don't want the 923 that has the AMD processor. So here's a buy it now price. No drives, of course, for $539, which is about the price of what it was when it was new. $350 for bids. This one comes with 2 SSD cache drives, and that's something to talk about. In the 2020 models, or the 2021 or the 2022 models, cache drives are really only for cache. In the 2023 models, and we're really only talking about the 423 for Plex, supposedly you can put 2 NVMe drives in that and use it for storage, supposedly. I haven't tried it because I don't have that model NAS. I'd love to play with one. But say you put 2 terabyte SSD drives in, you could set that up with your DSM and load your Plex package, or you load any Synology package or any Docker container on that faster SSD, and then load in your regular hard drives as volume 2 for your storage. That would be a nice little thing if it all works out that way. Like I said, I'd have to have one to play with one. So you can get these used. You're not going to be able to find one new. And I'm a stickler. I'd want one to come in its original box, but people know that you might pay more for it, especially to have it shipped to you. So let's look at the 1520, which I think is pretty versatile with an extra drive bay. They're even more expensive to buy used. So let's talk about that. The name itself means something. What's the difference between a DS423 and a 1520? Well, this number right here is the maximum amount of bays that this unit can handle. So this is a 5-bay NAS, but it can take 2 DS5, oh, I forgot the name, I think it's 517 expansion units. So the 2 5-bay expansion units added with the original 5 bays is 15 bays. Now if we go back to the DS423, the 4 signifies the original bays, and this is not expandable. And that is something that you may want to be concerned about, because you may pass even what the NAS can hold with 20 terabyte drives. And that's something else. If we're talking about a Synology NAS, let's do this. That may not be the right search term. RAID calculator is what I want. So, this isn't a perfect calculator because it does not tell you that you can't mix and match drives. So if I just click 2 16s and 2 8 terabytes, Synology is going to give me the usable space under different RAID situations. Well, this is misleading, because you could put 4 8 terabytes in to a DS423, and you can see how much space is lost to maintenance for the RAID versus how much space you have. And SH1 is Synology Hybrid RAID. It allows you to upgrade drive sizes later on. SHR2 is the same thing, but it has 2 drive fault tolerance versus 1 drive. So you'll see you're wasting as much space as you're using, but you have more protection because you can lose 2 drives. Well, what you can do is you can pop out 1 drive and start replacing with 16 terabytes. Now, it's kind of wasteful for the first drive, but then when you do the second one, now you start adding more space, and this is how you upgrade. You keep replacing an older drive, but this is the misleading point. I can click on 12 in the calculator, but I can't add a 12 terabyte drive to a NAS in real life because that's smaller than the new maximum 16 terabyte size. So if I do add a third 16 and then get rid of the last 16, so 4 16s, this is the space we've gained. And then you can do the same thing if you want to throw a 20 terabyte in. Well, it doesn't have it. We'll throw an 18 terabyte in, and you start the upgrade game again. What you can't do is, because you have an old 4 terabyte and then jump to a new 10 terabyte and then find out somebody has some sales on 8 terabytes, you can't mix and match that way. The calculator will tell you what your available space is, but you can only add them in the order of small to large. And of course you're going to waste space because they're mismatched, but you can't do that easily with other RAIDs. So I love a Synology NAS. If anybody buys one, you should visit Will at his Space Rex channel on YouTube to figure out how to get it set up and configured. But if you want more hardware transcoding power, you can buy the NAS that works for you and run Plex someplace else. So this is my Unraid experiment. I bought this Intel NUC on May 21st of this year. I haven't had it that long. I learned that Unraid was incredibly easy to set up, and I am not using an array on this. So let me bring Unraid in, wherever it is. Off screen. So if I go to the main tab, you'll see that I have a boot flash drive. I bought this FIT 32 gigabyte flash drive from eBay, and it shipped in from China because you want to have a quality flash drive to boot off from. Once it boots, everything runs in memory. Normally, you need an array, but the Sunday afternoon I sat down to set all this up, I quickly learned that you can substitute a flash drive in as your one required array drive or local storage drive. So the NUC only has a SATA connector, a single SATA connector, and an NVMe slot. So I grabbed a Sabrent Rocket NVMe 500 gigabytes, and I had a Corsair 500 gigabyte plain SSD laying around that didn't have much use. So I popped them in and I created a cache pool. Now the hardest part about Unraid was understanding that a cache pool isn't something that disappears when you turn your system off. And what you're able to do is you're able to run your Docker containers on the cache pool, and then I installed, what's it called? Unassigned drives. It's like a plugin for Unraid, and that allowed me to access my Synology NAS media. So the Unraid server is pointing back to the same media on my DS1520 Plex server. It's virtually identical, but it just has a better iGPU, and it works excellent. So Unraid was incredibly easy to set up versus learning how to do Docker containers on a Synology NAS. And I can't say enough of it. This winter, when things are more quiet, I think I'd like to take an old computer and play around with TrueNAS and Promox to see how they are as Plex test beds. But right now I'm thoroughly impressed with Unraid. And like I said earlier, if Synology made a i5 11th, 12th, or 13 gen model with that wonderful iGPU, I'd be all over a new system by Synology. But as it goes, this is really the only game in town to be able to buy new, this DS423, and it's got two limitations. It comes with not enough memory, which is easily solved with a 4 gigabyte memory upgrade stick, and it's not expandable past these 4 drives. This does not mean that you can't buy another Synology NAS. It doesn't have to be capable of hardware transcoding. It can be the 1522 to add more drives, and you can mount whatever volumes on that NAS on this one, and Plex can just see everything. So you do have expandability with a whole nother NAS in the Synology ecosystem, but you can't expand this one past the 4. So this video is getting long, but I just wanted to, oh, sorry, I forgot one thing. Besides a NUC, you can also put Unraid on a small form factor used computer. Now, as long as it's an 8th gen or newer, you're golden. So this is a 7th gen. That's probably okay. A lot of people don't know that the 7th gen iGPU was simply rebranded with little changes to become the 8th, 9th, and 10th gen iGPU in the newer Intel processors. So, buy it now for an 8th gen i5 for $125 isn't bad, but you should research Dell. I believe the 3060 models and the 5060s, or the 3000 series and the 5000 series, has a slower bus than the 7000 series. But that really doesn't matter for Plex. As long as you can put one NVMe drive in it and one SSD, you could do the same Unraid magic that I did. Or you can install Ubuntu on here on just one drive and wing it without that redundancy that I have. You'll have to create a user on your NAS for this computer. You'll have to go through a whole bunch of tricks in terminal to get that share permanently mounted in FSTAB. I did it in February with my 5th or 11th gen laptop, HP laptop, with the same Iris Xe iGPU, and it worked wonderfully. Survived a reboot, but that was a whole day project learning how to get that set, so that the laptop would survive a reboot and keep the NAS share mounted. Unraid was just so much easier. So now that's it. Again, if you're interested in Synology, that's the only game in town. If you want to do Qnap, you can use this NAS compatibility to see, and you've got to really know too, like this i5 4th gen processor. Just because this Qnap has an i5 doesn't mean it has hardware accelerated transcoding. So always check this list, and if it's a new NAS that's not on this list, find out which processor it's using, because there might be a similar NAS using the same processor. Like this Qnap model with an 8th gen i5, you get the same transcoding power as the Celeron CPU in my Synology NAS. So this is probably one of the best tools to use. Alright, let's end it there. Thanks for watching.